Alright, YouTube, today we have sort of a weird doubleheader. News related to both Carter and Clinton, two former U.S. presidents, both in the same party as Obama, sort of coming out and blasting things that are related to him. Uh, Maybe a concerted effort, maybe not. Now, of course, two links in the description, first and foremost. First to Carter. When you think of Jimmy Carter, you don't generally think, oh, great president, great leader or anything like that. I personally feel he was shafted predominantly because of things that were out of his control, weren't really his fault, and it was sort of just a perfect storm that, derailed his presidency. Did a good job with the SALT talks, generally speaking. He had some other good ideas, but he was seen as a little bit out of touch at the time. Of course, he's a Southern Democrat from Georgia, just like Clinton. The other story here, Clinton, is also a Southern Democrat from Arkansas. So you have these two Southern Democrat presidents, both now of which are more popular than the current Democratic President Obama. Very few people could have foreseen that he would be less popular than Carter. I personally think Carter was a lot better than people rate him as, even if he, certainly wasn't a great president. The first story is that Jimmy Carter feels that the NSA is spying on his email, and thus he has stopped using it and started giving all correspondence in the form of snail mail to foreign heads of state and so forth. I say bravo to him, and I think he should be more vocal on this issue. Because the NSA has overstepped all possible legal authority. The kind of spying that it is conducting, I've said it before and I'll probably have to say it again, is number one, not effective, and even analysts, even former NSA members themselves have said this is a ridiculous sort of thing that we're doing. Number two, it is unconstitutional. Anyone with common sense understands that it violates the right to privacy found in the Constitution. People from overseas who are used to this sort of surveillance may not see a problem with it. My own thought is the United States doesn't need the opinions of outsiders in response to its own internal policy. These same people cry foul when the NSA is then used to spy on their heads of state, which is a legal use of our surveillance ability, even if it's dubious, especially when it's applied to like Angela Merkel or David Cameron or something. It may be dubious, but it's not illegal because it's not being conducted on our own internal population. People external are governed by totally different rights and laws than people in our own country are by the Constitution, which protects them. So I say bravo to Jimmy Carter, and I've always thought that Jimmy Carter, even if his foreign policy ideas are wacky, even if his economy-related ideas are bizarre, he's at least more honest than most of the presidents we have had, especially in the last 50 or 60 years. Way more honest. No, I honestly believe that. Some people say, well, they're all corrupt. Well, then why did he get completely shafted and everything went wrong? Maybe he was too honest and someone decided to fuck him up. That is entirely possible. There are those who claim the same about Richard Nixon. I don't go that far. Nixon was... I think he started going insane towards the end of his first term. I think that's part of the reason why this happened. But Jimmy Carter, I think, honestly was more honest than the last few presidents we've had. Reagan, Alzheimer's in his second term, utterly run by corporations, father of neoconservatism. Clinton, yeah, I guess you could make a claim for Clinton, but look at the sort of things he was doing on the side were at least as corrupt as anything Bush did to the general population. Then you've got Daddy and little boy W. Bush. Nobody likes them if they're in their right mind. Obama is essentially the Democratic black version of Bush anyway. There are still liberals who don't seem to understand this. It makes no sense to me why they can't see that his policies are essentially unchanged from the Bush era, probably because they're a bunch of partisan panderers and don't understand what they're doing, just like there are Republicans who do the same thing. They're so taken in by this sort of football championship left versus right nonsense bullshit that they honestly believe that there's a fundamental difference between these two parties, and there's not. Carter is correct. The NSA is spying on his email. It's probably spying on his cell phone. It's probably spying on everyone he knows to make sure that no state secrets are going through. It's also spying on our Congress. It's spying on the Supreme Court. It's spying on everybody in the entire Western world continuously. Every line you've typed since probably around 2005 anywhere on the internet is in an archive somewhere. That's the truth. They don't necessarily have to disclose this for it to be true. They've got almost unlimited... The NSA is funded by the taxpayers to then spy on the taxpayers. They've got virtually limitless public funding. They don't have, and especially with deficit spending, where do you think all that extra money is getting funneled to? They don't have any budget. They can do literally whatever they want, and the government will greenlight it. Primarily because I think it's slowly... Even Feinstein, who's #1 lackey of Obama, even she has pointed this out, that it is concerning that they have begun to spy on Congress, specifically because they could then blackmail representatives. Essentially, they could control the entire government by virtue of simply having dirty laundry on every member of Congress. They could they could spy on Obama and control him in the same manner, which perhaps even Obama doesn't seem to understand. The NSA may be essentially left alone by the government because all of these people already know that it knows what they've done in the past for the last decade or so. Anything that they've done wrong, questionable emails, affairs, well, we can ruin your family life, embezzled a few dollars here and there, well, we can get you thrown out of office. Anyone that opposes them could wind up getting kicked out of office. And I think this is the reason why the NSA has not been attacked as heavily as it should by any reasonable person within Congress. My hope is that it, with additional leaks and with additional revelations about their program, it will eventually be utterly defunded and removed entirely and the archives completely destroyed. Now the second story, which is about the internet domain name system, the internet domains, and so basically control of the internet itself. The United States under Obama is basically saying, well, we don't want to control it anymore, it needs to go to the international community. Bill Clinton comes out and says this is a terrible idea, because even if the United States, and I agree with him here, I agree with Bill Clinton on this issue, even if the United States isn't necessarily the most free country anymore, it is still far better than most of these third world, especially Eastern countries, when it comes to things like press freedom and freedom of speech and so forth. We still at least marginally respect these things. Most countries on Earth do not. We are still well ahead of the curve when I think personally that we should endeavor to be the most free country on Earth, with the least regulation and the most free speech and the most press freedom. I think that should be our goal. But even in light of the fact that we've fallen away from this, the United States, I believe, largely is still a force for good, at least the people, and state representation and so forth. The federal government's utterly corrupt, but let's face it, every federal government on Earth is corrupt. There are some that are far more violent and insane than our own, and I think people in the United States simply don't realize this because they haven't spent time abroad. You don't even need to. You can talk to people who live in these countries and you can tell these governments are completely unhinged. You can talk to people, I've spoken to people in Turkey, in Mexico, in Russia, in Bulgaria, in Serbia, in all over the world, and even some of these first world countries are more unhinged than our own government and more openly and blatantly corrupt. To the point where people almost expect that level of corruption. I think in this country we're getting to that point, which is very concerning. It's a terrible idea to give international control to the internet. It is a horrible, horrible, horrible idea. What it opens up is the possibility that the internet could be balkanized and that these countries can essentially squish out any form of free speech that they think they don't want. That means that Erdogan, Tayyip the Dip in Turkey can shut off Twitter and nobody can say anything about it. You can simply block it entirely and nobody can use it. This means that some Saudi asshole pig eater down in Arabia can just shut off YouTube and say, well, fuck it. I don't give a shit because I don't want my people seeing, videos of women twerking or whatever. The internet is supposed to be an international platform, but in order for it to be an international platform, where people can talk to people in other countries and exchange ideas. This, by the way, has led to an enormous amount of innovation because people are capable of comparing notes across time zones instantly and very easily, often in a form they don't even have to pay for the service. It's great. The internet is great. Is it misused sometimes? Yeah. There's some questionable stuff on it, of course, but largely it's been a good thing for this world. If you give control to individual countries over their domain systems and so forth, they're just going to stamp that all out. There are plenty of countries out there that, if this goes through, will immediately shutter their internet and form a system like you have in China or something like that, where all of these social media platforms and these sharings for video, for files, Dropbox, things like that, will simply be blocked. And the reason they would block it is because even if they fall behind sort of on literature and the availability of these materials to their domestic population, they don't care because it will help them keep power because they can prevent people from that exchange of ideas. You've got a situation, and the third world hates the internet more than the first, because in the first world, freedom is marginally more respected. You look at the most free countries, most of them are in Europe. You look at Switzerland, Norway, countries like that. New Zealand's right up there. Australia's pretty close to the top. United States is up there. Canada, Britain and Germany. They've all got their own censorship problems, yes, but it's far less pervasive than what you see in these other countries. I can go on the internet and download the Anarchist Cookbook. I don't have I could if I wanted to, essentially. Disclaimer to the NSA there. The Anarchist Cookbook tells you about drugs and bomb making and all of these other things. But I can download it, and it's legal for me to do that. As long as it's one of the older versions, it's, out of print and out of copyright. If it was ever even copyrighted to begin with, I'm not sure because of its content. In most countries, if you did that, you'd probably end up in jail. If the government was, literate enough about the internet to know what the book was about, they'd probably throw you in jail. They would assume you were a terrorist. Over here, it might get you on a watch list, yes, but you can still download it and read it if you want. I can go on the internet, and I can call people fat pigs, and I can say that they're retarded, and I can talk all sorts of shit about religion. I can go on a racist tirade against a group if I had the will to do so. I can run people down all day, and as long as I'm not threatening, giving a credible threat to an individual or group or an actual building or person or something, I'm not going to get in trouble. I can do it literally 24/7. I could sit here and inject Red Bull directly into my veins and spend 72 hours doing nothing but telling people how good drugs are and how good rape is and how terrible black people are and how growing pot is great and all of these other things that are dubiously legal. I won't get in trouble for that. But if I'm in Mexico and I say, haha, the government sucks, I might get a knock on the door. If I'm in Saudi Arabia and I post on Twitter or something and I say the Saudi family are a bunch of swine, I'll probably get beheaded. If I'm in Russia and I say Putin is a cocksucker, I'll probably get a knock on my door too. In these countries, force is used. Over here, you might get on a watch list. I don't think that's acceptable either, but it's a little bit better than getting your head bashed in and getting thrown in a gulag, or getting shot in the back of the head and dumped into the Volga, or left in a shallow grave out in the middle of the Arabian desert. It is. The United States has largely governed the internet with a benevolent hand. There will be plenty of, I can almost hear virulent politics especially saying, no, the USA's, terrible, we should give Russia control of the internet, or Romania, or something like that, or every country should be able to choose what it wants its citizens to consume. That's not the way I look at it as an American, and I kind of like the fact that this country controls the internet, because it keeps statists like you from fucking it up. I like talking to people in other countries. I won't get to do that if other countries gain control over their own domain systems. because it will allow them to simply block out anything that they find inconvenient. Because people use the internet to expose the corruption of these leaders. They do it here all the time. If it weren't for the internet, Obama would probably still be a popular president, because a lot of his more little mistakes probably wouldn't be out there for people to consume. I can look at hours and hours and hours of speeches by Obama and analyze them for mistakes before the internet, or before it was certainly as popular and interconnected as it is now. You would have seen his speech on TV. You would have been watching a single channel at a time. You would have seen the speech, and you probably never would have seen it again, unless the media, which is a handful of companies, seized on that clip, saw a mistake or something really good in it, and decided to air it with their own bias intact. Essentially splice it up and put only good or only bad things on it. But on the internet, I can watch the whole speech over and over again. I can remix it, I can put a laugh track on it, I can do whatever I want to it. The internet is more important than any other single phenomenon, which is why it's constantly under attack, in keeping people from being too corrupt, because it creates accountability. I can go out with my phone to, I can see, let's say I live in DC and Obama's driving by in his limo and he's flipping people off out the window. I can take a picture of that or take a video of that with my phone and put it on the internet. And soon millions of people will see Obama flipping off the country. The same can be done in Turkey, or Mexico, or Russia, or Australia, or any of these other countries. But if these individual countries are allowed to take access of their own domain systems, then there's no accountability at all. The internet balkanizes, and you have a patchwork of countries where one country might block Twitter. This country might block, they block it already. There are plenty of ways around it. If you give them control over the domain system, you will no longer have that. They will be like North Korea or China. The other problem is that the internet itself, even if it does remain intact, instead of balkanizing, something even worse could happen. An international sort of panel of individuals decides what's appropriate to be on the internet as a whole, because the United States no longer reigns over it. The United States largely hasn't blocked anything. It's gone after a few file-sharing sites, and it's used FBI resources to go after like child sex predators and things like that, which I think most people agree are legitimate uses of its power. Mediafire, Mega Upload, that's a little bit of a gray area, but mostly it's good. What if an international panel with some Mexicans and Russians and all of these other groups gets onto this panel and says, well, we think that YouTube needs to be more censored, otherwise we're going to block it in all of these countries. Twitter needs more, anti-free speech legislation applied to it because people are saying racist things, and we need to throw these terrible racist Nazis in jail. If the United States honestly believes in free speech, it's not clear that Obama gives a shit about this issue. But if the United States honestly believes that it's exceptional and that it can protect these things, it should keep power over the internet domain system. It should not give it over to the international community. It cannot let it balkanize under any way, shape, or form. It would be a terrible scenario. And it would cripple domestic businesses here. A lot of these large internet sites that would stand to lose traffic because these other countries might fuck with them are U.S. companies. You could see the evaporation of hundreds of thousands of jobs. You could see tax revenue go down the toilet. There are cities in this country that thrive specifically because some internet-based company functions from them. And these companies could go bankrupt, or they could have to fire workers or put them on furlough or something. I don't think Obama has considered this, although with his jobs record, it's not clear he would care in the beginning. Clinton, hopefully, because of his hegemonic sort of dominance with the old guard Democrats, can convince Obama to sit down, shut up, and leave the issue alone. Bill Clinton's way more, even Carter's more popular than Obama at this point, so hopefully his words about the NSA also will take some sort of effect. Why would people choose to listen to the current administration that clearly has no clue what it's doing? as opposed to Clinton, who was marginally popular and I think more honest than Obama, which is saying something for fucking Bubba Bill. And Carter, who even if you hate Carter and think he's a terrible president, still more honest, still more popular than Obama. You've got two former presidents saying things right now, particularly related to the internet in both cases, are going terribly wrong. Obama not only is fucking up, but is doing something that is damaging to our country, to our credibility. In the case of the domain system, to tax revenue, to businesses. You're going to give international control over a system that largely incorporates most of these very large sites are American sites. They employ many hundreds of thousands of people. You've got Facebook, and you've got Google, and you've got YouTube, ancillary of Google. You've got all of these sites, Omegle. You've got all of these huge websites and all of the associated sort of peripheral services that they offer. Well, those need people to do maintenance on servers. Those need electricians. It props up manufacturing for all of these little chips and so forth that are used in these computers. It props up everything. The U.S. tech market has been growing steadily since the internet revolution. And now Obama's saying he doesn't care if the international community sort of gang rapes the internet. That is a terrible, terrible, terrible idea. You can see it ending in literal disaster for a lot of these companies. Because Google and Facebook and all of these other services are not liked by any country that is overseen by a particularly despotic regime. Even if you only give it international control to this system in the form of sort of the Western world, there are still countries that might attempt to censor it. France has gone after Twitter repeatedly. Germany has gone after YouTube repeatedly. GMA on the basis of copyright. France after Twitter on the basis that in France, if you make sort of a racist remark, you can actually get in trouble for that. Over here, you can be as racist as you want. Well, even if I don't give a crap about the issue, I still want people to be able to speak their mind. Because in a Darwinistic sort of evolutionary sense, I believe that good ideas tend to prosper over time and bad ideas tend to die out if you give them equal footing. Well, that's what the internet in its current form generally does. You don't see the sort of interventionism that you see with other businesses. That could end. It's a terrible idea. And as for Carter and the NSA, I think Carter's 100% correct. The only thing being, of course, not all people are able to always use snail mail. Of course, it costs money to do so, number one. But number two, there are people who, because of the Postal Service keeps fucking up anyway, it won't be possible in a few years anyway. They're move to a 5-day mail and all of these other things. They'll start charging more and the post office will fall apart because nobody seems to know how to fix it, even though the original problem is they were siphoning money off the post office to begin with for pensions. So that's my thought on these two stories. Link again in the description to both. A sad day when Obama is suggesting essentially removing U.S. control over the domain system. And as for the NSA, it's a problem. The people seem to want to ignore it, but it's not going to go away. You're going to keep seeing this material. Eventually, I believe it'll come out that the NSA not only monitors these representatives in Congress and so forth, but has actively blackmailed them. I believe at some point one of them will come forward with that info. They'll have proof of it, and then shit will hit the fan. And then you'll see the NSA probably defunded or at least severely overhauled. Of course, you'll still get spied on, most likely. But at least Congress won't. So then you don't even have accountability for Congress to anyone. That's about all. Peace out.